Before I got sick, I had queried agents hoping to find someone who could get the book published, who could send it out to editors and publishing houses. And for the most part, I had struck out. But the interesting part was, before I got really sick, there wasn't a good ending to my story, I guess you could say. And then when I got really sick, there was this dramatic twist that I added to the manuscript, and that really gave it the kind of the twist, the punch that it needed. So, with my health improving, I reached out to editors again. I started querying, and unlike my first attempt a few years earlier, this time I was getting some interest. Now, there were probably a few things that helped me this time around. The first thing was I was getting articles and essays published in major publications. As I had begun writing more, I had also begun sending my work out more, and I ended up getting published by the LA Times, the Washington Post, the New York Times. It was actually around when I was querying agents that I got accepted in the Modern Love column of the New York Times. So I had that essay come out, and then also around that time, I was featured in a Netflix show, which I don't really like to talk about because it wasn't a good experience, but it did bring some attention to me and my story. And also, I had amassed a decent social media following. I think I had over 10,000 Instagram followers. I had over 30,000 Twitter followers. I had a blog. I had a blog that was pretty successful. I had several thousand subscribers to my blog. So I had all that going on, and that certainly helped. I don't want to say that you need to do those things. You need to achieve that sort of success or kind of boost your resume in that way in order to get an agent, but it definitely does help. Before I had had that sort of success, I remember agents and publishers giving me feedback and saying you have to have 100,000 followers on Instagram or whatever before they can really take you on. And I don't think all agents are like that. I think that might have just been one agent who felt that way. I've seen authors with a few hundred followers on social media get book deals and go on to become New York Times bestsellers. So I wouldn't put too much weight on that, though. If you're finding yourself struggling to get an agent and a book deal, that might be something to strive for, at least some version of that success. I will also say that although I had those things on my resume, I had that sort of success to help try to get an agent and a publisher, I wasn't all that successful. I did end up getting an agent. I signed with my first agent, but we ultimately struck out when we took my memoir on submission to the big publishing houses. I think we sent it to maybe 100 different editors at publishing houses. There were a few times where we were close to getting a book deal or an offer, and it just ultimately did not happen. Because it's important to realize that there are so many levels, there are so many hurdles that you have to go through to get a book deal. And I couldn't clear all of them. I couldn't clear all of those hurdles. I got past the agent hurdle. I signed with an agent. We submitted it. We took it on submission, sent it out to editors. And a couple times we even got an editor who wanted it, who liked it, but they ultimately could not convince their colleagues, their bosses, to take it on. One of the higher ups or one of the marketing team or somebody else on their team ultimately vetoed it, and we just didn't get it. And I got to tell you, it is heartbreaking when that happens. I had it happen a couple times, and honestly, I'm still getting over it. I don't know if I'll ever really fully get over how heartbreaking that is, because it's something that I wanted so badly to be so close to having it happen and then have it ripped away. It is devastating. But I will say that when that happens, it does give you a new perspective on things. I had been romanticizing the whole thing, getting a book deal with a big publisher, and getting on the New York Times bestseller list or even the USA Today bestseller list. I had definitely romanticized it. And I think a lot of people do romanticize it because it is easy to romanticize, especially the closer you get to achieving that goal. The farther along you get in the process, the easier it is to romanticize the ending. So when I got my agent, I thought, oh, it's done. I got it. It's in the bag. Like, the hard part is over. I got an agent. My agent's going to do the rest. Like, it's a no-brainer. It's in the bag. That, I think, is a mistake that a lot of new authors make. And it's totally understandable to feel that way because, one, getting an agent is so difficult. Once you achieve it, you feel like, oh, that's got to be it. Like, there can't be any more to it. Like, that was so hard. That was the hardest thing I've done in my career. So, like, it's that's got to be it, right? But there's way more hurdles to come, even harder, even more difficult hurdles, which when I started querying, I I couldn't even have imagined how much harder it would be. Because once you get an agent, then your agent basically has to do what you just did. Once you're signed with them, they have to query editors at publishing houses, and it's much the same process. Sometimes the editors don't reply, sometimes they send terse rejections, sometimes they show interest and it seems like it might happen, but then it doesn't, like in my case. So that's basically where I ended up. I didn't clear that hurdle. And the truth is even if you do clear that hurdle and you get a book deal, there are even more hurdles to come. Then you actually have to finish the book and work with the editor to get it published. And then once it's published, then there's even more hurdles. You have to market and sell the book. There's all kinds of things you have to do. And in many ways, I found that out the hard way. I found it out in a kind of unconventional way. I didn't end up getting a deal with a big publisher, but I did end up publishing my book, When Force Meets Fate, with an indie publisher. So it wasn't the big publisher that I wanted, but I was happy to get my story out there and have people read it. So if you'd like to know more about my process getting my book published, if you would like to know more stories about working with agents and editors, getting essays published, let me know in the comments. I'm happy to make more videos like this. And please, if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel, and we'll see you next time.